I'm a trained pharmacologist. I'm a drug discovery scientist. I think that I bring leadership to the research department because I have a lot of experience. The challenges in front of us are big. One of the biggest challenges is the regulators, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. It's very difficult right now to develop drugs and devices for people in general, but even more difficult in type 1 diabetes. So I think my background in regulatory, I've worked that area globally, internationally, as well as in the US, and I think that my leadership in that area has been very beneficial to JDRF. And I'll talk about the artificial pancreas project in a few minutes. So I've been building a department over the last 18 months. We've had a big change out. So all of you are aware of how the research department is set up right now. We now have 3 functional groups that are under me. There's about 50 people in the research department. You may not be aware, but we're definitely trying to professionalize the department, and I'll tell you why we need to do that. Type 1 diabetes is a very complex disease. It includes immunology, it includes cell biology, it includes understanding of devices, it is involved in all aspects of autoimmune disease. So it's very complex, and it's not easy to understand. So you have to have a breadth of research experience in order to actually make good research funding decisions. So we've been professionalizing the scientific team. We actually now have 27 PhD scientists, PhD, MD scientists that work for JDRF. All of these have backgrounds in very specific areas that are part of the portfolio of which we're funding. So on the cure side of the portfolio, we have immunologists, we have cell biologists, we have beta cell experts, we have people that are expert in what we call regeneration. That all is working on the cure side of the portfolio. We also have 2 engineers on the cure side of the portfolio, because I'm going to tell you about a really exciting program that we're really moving on, which is called encapsulation. And I'll come back to that. On the treat side, the flagship is the artificial pancreas. I'm going to talk a little bit about updates in that area so you know what's going on. But we don't just work in the artificial pancreas, we also work in glucose modulating agents. And that is to look at new agents that could possibly add value, drugs that you would take to help actually monitor or modulate glucose control. So we have a pharmacologist that we recruited that's working that area for us. He's skilled in clinical research, which is what we're going to have to do. We also just launched a pregnancy trial, so I have a skilled scientist that we brought in from Genentech who has a lot of experience to add to that portfolio. And of course, on that side of the portfolio, we need an engineer. So we hired an engineer that actually works with that team on all aspects of the artificial pancreas. And then I think you know, when Jeffrey took over, we did a brand refresh. I hope all of you've seen our new brand. I love our new logo. I love it. I'd like to hear when we go to question and answer if any of you've looked at it. It was interesting last night. We did an event last night, and somebody came up to me and gave me their interpretation of this logo. We worked really hard to come up with this logo. It was not done overnight. We had many focus groups. We had many people in the room talking about what does this logo need to represent. There's some subtleties in the logo, so I'd like you to take a look at it, and then later you can give me your thoughts about it. But I love the tagline. Most important, I love the tagline. Because JDRF's mission in research is about improving lives, keeping people healthy while they're living with a disease, while we're trying to find a means of either curing or preventing the disease. And so I love the fact that we've moved to that tagline, because I think for those that are established type 1, I think they want to have better treatments, and I think that that's our obligation to the type 1 community. And also to continue to look for what are the scientific pieces of information we need to figure out how we can cure the disease. So take a look at the new logo, take a look at the tagline, and if you have something to say about it, I am looking for comments from the field of what you think about our brand refresh that we did on November 1st. We have now what's called a partnering group. And this partnering group is critically important. This partnering group is made up of 7 people. They are skilled in contract negotiations. They're skilled in scouting for funding opportunities, primarily in the company, biotech, startup area. And I'll tell you why I think that's very important. We can do lots and lots and lots of research. As you know, I come from the pharmaceutical arena, and you can continue to do research forever, getting more information about the science. But if you don't engage the people that are skilled in the art of taking those research findings and applying it, and actually are the ones that are able to develop those findings, if you don't hook up with those people, you will never realize patient outcome. So I strongly believe that it's critically important for us to have a partnering group, that we need to take our money and we need to leverage it well. And we need to make partnerships with companies that are skilled in the art to deliver us the new drugs, the new therapies, the new devices. Because you know what? Academia is not going to do it for you. We can fund in academia, but they do not develop new devices. They're not skilled in the art. They do not develop drugs. So we have to partner. JDRF has spent, last year, our budget, we spent $116 million in research. And I did a complete assessment of the portfolio of the $116 million, which is an amazing amount of money. For me, I'm like flabbergasted at how much this foundation spends. It is a lot of money. What I want to know is how much of that money actually went to the translational research space. And that space, what I say is, taking scientific finding and really starting to head to the clinic, head to humans. That's what's going to be where we're going to get patient outcome. Unfortunately, of the $116 million, less than 10% of the budget went to that. And to be honest, not good enough. It's just not good enough. And that's why we made a commitment in August to put this partnering team on, to integrate this partnering team within the scientific team, and to make sure that at least 20% of our budget is going in the translational space. Because Jeffrey Brewer has charged me with patient outcome, and that's the only measurement of success, that we have to start adding value to patients with type 1 diabetes. We cannot do that if we don't partner and leverage our money and actually do these deals with companies, biotech, and startup companies. So the partnering group is a critical function of JDRF. It is relatively new. I think that we've built a really strong team. These guys are tough negotiators, I can tell you. I want to talk a little bit about partnering because I've been in the field and I've heard some blowback about the fact that JDRF is taking their hard-earned money and they're giving it to companies. Well, first of all, we don't just give it to companies. We have a team and we have absolute requirements in order for us to give any money to companies. First of all, one of the first and foremost important parts when we give and do what we call an industry partnership is that we have a right to sit on a quarterly basis in their meetings and know everything they're doing. So first and foremost, we sit on their governance boards. Secondly, we don't just give the money away. There are milestone payments, which means they are accountable. They have to meet a very specific scientific objective before they get paid. So when you see us do an announcement, such as we just did 2 partnerships in the last month, one for diabetic eye disease and another one in the encapsulation area, and you hear that we put $3 million down on the table, they don't get our $3 million. They don't get our $3 million until they meet their milestones. So if they don't meet their milestones, they don't get our money. So first and foremost, we sit on their boards, and second, they don't get our money until they actually tell us they're doing something that is literally agreed on prior. But the other thing that I think is critically important for us is that if they choose to stop doing what we actually formed the partnership around, we have what's called march-in rights, which means they have a period of time to either put that in somebody else's hands that will develop it for us, or JDRF gets to march in, take the intellectual property, and place it with somebody else that's willing to do what we were paying them to do. That's very important. And then, of course, if the companies are successful in all of our deals, and they actually get to market and they get to patients and they start to make money, they have to pay us back our investment. So I just wanted to put that on the table so that you all know that when we do these company deals, we're not throwing it over the wall. We're not just giving it to them. We're making them accountable. We sit at the table with them, and they don't get paid unless they're successful. And if they choose to walk away from us, we get to take their intellectual property and put it with somebody else that's willing to develop it. So I think that the partnering group is a critical aspect of the research department, and it's one that we will absolutely ramp up, and you're going to see more and more of these deals with companies as we start to mature the portfolio. Sensors. We know for a fact that one of the challenges and barriers to fully realizing a closed-loop artificial pancreas is going to be the sensing technology. About, I would say 6 months, I guess it was last June, if you were all watching the press releases, we announced a new initiative. I think all of you know we've been working very hard with the regulators to actually get what we call clinical guidance, to get an artificial pancreas through what we call the regulatory hurdles. When I took over the program of the artificial pancreas, the biggest challenge to us was, and we started meeting with the FDA, and we'd sit in these rooms with them, and we just couldn't get anywhere with them. And one day, I said to them, look it, you guys, we need some clinical guidelines of how in the world we're going to test an artificial pancreas. You've given us nothing. We don't know, so it's a free-for-all. We could do all this clinical work, spend all this money, invest all this money, all JDRF's money, and get nothing, because you're not telling us what is going to be acceptable for us to test in humans. And there is a head of the artificial pancreas regulatory team down in Washington. He says to me, Darlene, you're not going to see clinical guidance for about 5 years. And I looked him dead in the eye and I said, I don't think so. 5 years is way too long. We walked out of that wonderfully warm meeting that we had with them that day. I assembled the team, and I'm trained in the regulatory science, and I said, you know what, we're not waiting for the FDA to write these clinical guidance. We're going to write them ourselves. And I think the team went, what? I'm going, we're going to go write them. So we did. We got 10 extremely well-recognized clinicians. I brought them to Washington. We met 2 days in a row. We sat them in a room. We closed the blinds. We closed the door. And we wrote those clinical guidance. And to be honest, they were amazing clinical guidance. And we said, we're going to present it back to the FDA. And that's exactly what we did. We emailed it to them first and said, we're coming to see you. And so it was actually a great day at the FDA. I can tell you, we go there a lot, and it's not a great day. It's very contentious. We don't think they're moving as fast and with a sense of urgency that we'd like them. Their job is human safety. We think they err on a highly conservative side of human safety, as they should. We take it seriously, but we walked into the room. They had our clinical guidance in their hand, and the head of the team down there. We all sat around the room, as we usually did, them on one side, us on the other side, and the head goes, I have to say this. No patient organization has ever done such a thing. And they go, and not only, it's pretty damn good. And I'm like, hey, we did your work. We did it in like 3 months flat. And to be honest, I think you all saw the press release. They actually posted clinical guidance, and they utilized our document to write the clinical guidance. It has been out for public review, and on March 5th, they'll be taking all the public comments that went out, and we'll actually have a clinical guidance. What does that mean? A clinical guidance for us means they're telling us what it's going to take to be able to test this artificial pancreas in humans. So we have a pathway, and hopefully if you achieve the actual clinical work they want, you'll be successful. So huge advocacy effort on behalf of JDRF, just a huge, huge win. Something that I think most people don't know what happened behind the scenes and how we ended up with this clinical guidance. So I'm very proud of JDRF for making that move to take the bold move and actually write a clinical guidance. It's a big deal. And I think even the team was like, I don't think we can do this, but we did. So you all may not know, But at JDRF, we actually have a regulatory scientist that we hired that works with us on the artificial pancreas. So she spends each and every day just working the regulators for us. In January, we decided with our new program on cure encapsulation, which I'm going to talk about in just a minute, we actually hired what I call a drug regulatory specialist for the drug side of the portfolio. So we now have 2 full-time regulatory specialists that work in Washington, in our Washington office, that are going to be working the regulators for us on a daily basis. So let's see, that's APP. So when you unpack the artificial pancreas, one of the other deals we did when I first joined, 4 months after I joined, we did what's called the Becton Dickinson deal. And I can tell you we got a lot of blowback because we put $4.5 million down on the table. We made a deal with a company that had never been in the diabetes space. And it may seem simple to people, and I can tell you there were some volunteers very unhappy about this, but the infusion sets for pumpers are not great. Matter of fact, if you saw the data on these infusion sets and how, to me, how antiquated and how awful they are, if I had a child that had to insert these things, we're like, really? So we decided to invest in this company, and we invested in Becton Dickinson because if you know anything about them, they're very versed in needle technology. And if you look at these infusion sets, you're like, really? I would never put that in a child. What we wanted was to come up with better needles, better insertion, less inflammation, and also less kinking in your tubing. So, you know, for all of you, any of you that pump or have your children are pumping, you know that those tubes can kink. That means they're not getting their insulin that they think they're supposed to be getting. So we put on the table the money. We asked them to invest. We asked them for microneedles, much smaller insertions so that small children could end up using pumps if parents want them to. And this is a real success story because it wasn't highly, I guess it wasn't highly received by the JDRF community. They couldn't understand why we were investing in such a thing. But I'll tell you why it's exciting. They were able to develop microneedle technology, little tiny needles that literally will insert pain-free. They've been able to develop much better tubing so that your tubing sets won't be kinking. We should have less inflammation. It's a win-win. And the bottom line is that hopefully a year from now they'll be able to get approval by the regulatory agencies to be using these infusion sets. But the story doesn't end there. So we started this relationship with Becton Dickinson over better infusion sets and microneedles. But the real win for JDRF is the fact that this has been a tremendous partnership. As I told you, we sit on the governance of this company, and we've actually got them to get in the type 1 diabetes space. So before, they weren't in type 1 at all. Now they realize that this is something that could be absolutely a very good area to work in, and they're now working in sensor technology. So win, win, win. If we hadn't been in front of them, if we hadn't done the infusion sets and really believed this would have patient value, you wouldn't have a big player who has lots of money, of which we can actually leverage in the game, and now they're working on new sensor technology. So we are so excited. They've been a great partner of ours. We will continue to partner with them. And you know, I just want to tell everybody, we put $4.5 million in the game. These people have invested so much money on these new infusion sets. So we've leveraged our money 10, 20-fold. So we gave them a little bit, we spurred them in the game, and now they're a really good player. And hopefully they'll also develop new sensor technology for us. So I just wanted to share that's a win for JDRF.